Around the world, thousands of people disappear every day. Some of those people are eventually found either dead or alive, but sometimes, just sometimes, they remain missing. At other times, when they're found to have passed away, we only end up having more questions than answers. This is Strange Disappearances from Around the World, Volume 1.
Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon, Phuket, Panama. Chapter 1, Prologue.
On March 15th, 2014, the 21-year-old Kris Kremers and the 22-year-old Lisanne Froon would travel from their home in the Netherlands to Panama as part of a 6-week vacation they'd planned over the past few months. Exploring the country over the course of 2 weeks, they would eventually make their way over to the town of Phuket on March 29th. There, they had made plans to live with a host family and start volunteer work at a local daycare. However, the head of the daycare center would have an emergency that they had to attend to in a nearby village, meaning that Kris and Lisanne's volunteer work would be postponed until at least next week. Disappointed by the news, they figured they would make the most of this development by filling in their time with various activities. One such plan involved them hiking the Pianista Trail on April 1st.
Chapter 2, Summit.
On April 1st at around 11 a.m., they set out into the Panama jungle with both of their phones at around 50%. From here on out, however, we don't have an exact series of events. Instead, a lot of the information that has been gathered about this case comes from the timestamps at which various photos were taken on Lisanne's handheld camera or the girl's phone records. In this instance, when viewing the timestamps, we know that the girls arrived at the summit at around 1 p.m. After the summit, we get what is referred to as photo 505, which shows a location that's about 20 minutes down the other side of the peak. For reference, 505 just means it's the 505th photo taken on the handheld camera, with the same naming convention also being used for the following photos. Continuing further into the jungle, both of their phones would lose network connection at around 1:39 p.m. In other words, no phone calls would ever go through after this point. 15 minutes later at 1:54 p.m., we get photos 507 and 508. These images showcase a location just about an hour away from the summit and are considered their last known location. Strangely, at some unknown point after this, photo 509 would be taken and then purposefully deleted. All attempts to recover this photo have failed. From here, we have to go off of the girls' phone records.
Chapter 3A, April 1st.
Just under 3 hours after photos 507 and 508, at 4:39 p.m., Kris's phone is used and attempts to call 112, which is the emergency number used in Europe and parts of Asia. With that being said, it's worth noting that Panama does not use this number for emergency calls, with it instead using 911. 12 minutes later at 4:51 p.m., Lisanne's phone is used and also attempts to call 112. As stated earlier, however, neither of these calls, nor the following calls, are ever successfully placed due to a lack of reception. Around an hour later at 5:58 p.m., both girls switched their phones off at the same time. Kris's phone was at 42%, and Lisanne's phone was at 19%.
Chapter 3B, April 2nd.
Lisanne's phone is powered on at 6:58 a.m. and attempts to call 112. It is powered off shortly after the call fails. Over an hour later at 8:14 a.m., Kris's phone is manually switched from 2G to 3G. We don't know why this was done, though it's assumed that she was attempting to boost her network connection, as, right after this, she attempts to call 112. However, this, of course, doesn't work, with her then making her way over to her phone settings and making it so that the phone's control panel could be opened without a pin. Kris's phone is powered off for the rest of the day. On the other hand, Lisanne's phone continues to see some use. At 10:53 a.m., Lisanne's phone is powered on and attempts to call 112, and when this fails, it immediately attempts to call 911. Her phone is then powered off. Just about 3 hours later at 1:50 p.m., Lisanne's phone is powered on, only to be powered off shortly after. We don't know if anything was done on her phone during this time. Then at 4:19 p.m., Lisanne's phone is powered on, with it staying on throughout the night and into the morning. Later that same night at 9:30 p.m., Kris and Lisanne are officially declared missing persons. For the next couple of days, mass searches would be conducted around the Pianista Trail.
Chapter 3C, April 3rd.
Lisanne's phone is used to open the AccuWeather app for 13 seconds at 2:21 a.m. 25 minutes later, other apps are also open on Lisanne's phone for a total of 41 seconds, though we don't know what apps these were. Around 5 hours later, Lisanne's phone is finally powered off at 7:36 a.m. The battery is barely at 1% and remains off for the rest of the day. At 9:33 a.m., Kris's phone is powered on and attempts to call 911 twice. With both calls failing, her phone is powered off. Her phone is then powered on and off at 11:47 a.m. It's unknown if anything was done on her phone at this point. Then at 3:59 p.m., Kris's phone is powered on once again. 3 minutes later, the address book on the phone was opened. The contact Miriam was looked up on WhatsApp, with this undoubtedly referring to Miriam, who was the mother of the host family they were staying with. There were no attempts to call or message her, with the phone then being powered off at 4:02 p.m.
Chapter 3D, April 4th.
Lisanne's phone is powered on and off at 4:50 a.m. 10 minutes later, it is powered on, only to power off due to its battery being fully depleted. Her phone never successfully turns on again, though there are 2 supposed attempts to activate it in the following days. As such, from here, we only have Kris's phone records to go off of. At 10:17 a.m., Kris's phone is powered on and off. At 1:42 p.m., the same.
Chapter 3, April 5th.
At 10:50 a.m., Kris's phone is powered on and off. This marks the last time her PIN is ever entered correctly. From here, her phone PIN was either entered incorrectly or there was no PIN attempt. With that being said, at 1:14 p.m., someone attempts to power Lisanne's phone on. However, since the phone's battery was fully depleted, it stays off. 23 minutes later, Kris's phone is powered on and then powered off a minute later.
Chapter 3F, April 6th.
Kris's phone is powered on at 10:26 a.m. with the clock app being opened. A minute later, her phone is powered off. At 2:35 p.m., Kris's phone is powered on and off. This is the final phone log we have for the next several days until April 11th. But there's something else, probably the strangest part of this entire case.
Chapter 4, Nighttime Photos.
On April 8th, Lisanne's handheld camera is used to take 100 photos between 1:29 a.m. and 4:10 a.m., some in quick succession, others not. Viewing the camera gallery, the last photo we have access to is photo 508, which was taken all the way back on April 1st at 1:54 p.m. Keep in mind that there was also a photo 509, though the only information we have about it is that it was purposely deleted at some point for unknown reasons. With that being said, not all 100 nighttime photos have been released to the public, with investigators and family members claiming that some of the photos are of nothing but darkness. Regardless, all nighttime photos seem to be taken from almost the same position every time. I will pick out pictures of interest starting with photo 541, which appears to be the left side of someone's face. As you can see for yourself, not much can be gathered about who this photo is of. However, for my personal beliefs, I believe that the person operating the camera on most, if not all of these photos, is Lisanne. In photo 542, taken only 15 seconds after the previous photo, we see what appears to be a cliffside with various pieces of foliage around. Then we get to photo 550. It's unclear what this is exactly meant to be, though it appears to have been made by one or both of the girls as a means of signaling potential search parties. Throughout this series of photos, we also sporadically see what appears to be an incredibly bright light. In a similar fashion to photo 541, which appeared to be the left side of someone's face, I believe that these photos involve the camera's flash reflecting off the white skin of Lisanne. More specifically, I believe that Lisanne had the camera on a strap around her neck, with it seemingly resting on her chest and pointing to the sky. In other words, these photos seem as though they were taken by Lisanne while she lay on her back. Then in photo 576, we see what appears to be pieces of paper that have very purposefully been laid out with a reflective object placed in their center. It seems as though the paper furthest from the camera is placed in an S shape, meaning that the paper is most likely arranged to spell SOS, with the reflective object in the center being used as a means of grabbing the attention of overhead helicopters. Many of the remaining photos are of the night sky or of various surroundings with the exception of photo 580, which appears to be a photo of Kris's hair. With that being said, it's almost impossible to tell what angle we are viewing her head from.
Chapter 5, April 10th and April 11th.
2 days after the nighttime photos were taken, on April 10th at 5:15 a.m., we have the second and final instance where someone attempts to power on Lisanne's phone. As we've established, however, it doesn't power on due to a lack of battery. The next day on April 11th, Kris's phone is powered on at 10:51 a.m. It stays on for the next hour, with it then being powered off at 11:56 a.m. From here, the phone is never powered on again, even despite the fact that it had 22%.
Chapter 6, Bag and Bones.
61 days later on June 11th, a local woman would find a backpack next to a river. It contained $87, 5 quarters, Lisanne's handheld camera and her insurance card, an empty plastic case, 2 pairs of sunglasses, 2 bras, both of the girls' phones, a lock, a key, a small padlock, a candy wrapper, and a single water bottle with a very small amount of water in it. According to the forensics team, the backpack showed signs of dragging, with it also most likely being damaged by a sharp-edged object of some kind. 7 days later, we would get our first confirmation that the girls had passed away. Half of Kris's pelvis bone and one of Lisanne's boots were found with some of her bone fragments still inside. Of note, the area in which the bones were found had already been searched by rescue teams. In the following days, weeks, and months, one of Kris's shoes and her 10th right rib would be found in addition to portions of Lisanne's tibia and femur. Almost all of these bones were found 14 hours north of where photo 508 was taken. What truly happened to Kris and Lisanne continues to remain unknown.
Brianna Maitland, Montgomery, Vermont. Chapter 1, Prologue.
On March 19, 2004, the 17-year-old Brianna Maitland would take an exam to receive her GED. Then, upon completing the test, her mother, Kelly, would take her out for lunch to celebrate. During lunch, Kelly would recall that her daughter seemed as though she were in good spirits. After the meal, the two of them would go around town to complete various errands. Then, while waiting in the checkout line in one of the stores, Kelly would notice that her daughter was focused on something outside. A moment later, Brianna would tell her mother that she had to leave and would return in a few moments. Before she could return, however, Kelly would finish checking out and meet Brianna out in the parking lot. In contrast to the good mood she seemed to be in during lunch, Kelly now stated that her daughter seemed to be on edge and anxious.
Chapter 2. Work.
Brianna would tell her mother that she had to go home and prepare for her upcoming shift at the restaurant she worked for. Taking this as a sign that Brianna didn't want to talk about whatever may have happened in the parking lot, Kelly wouldn't pry. Respecting her wishes, Kelly would drop Brianna off at her childhood friend's house at around 3:45 p.m. This would mark the last time Kelly would ever see her daughter again. Then, sometime before she would leave for her shift, Brianna would write her childhood friend, Jillian, a note. She stated that she would be back after work later that same night. A few hours later, at around 11:30 p.m., just around the time Brianna clocked out, some of her coworkers would ask her if she wanted to eat dinner with them. In response to this, Brianna would say that she couldn't, as she was tired and would have to wake up early the next morning in order to make it to her second job on time. All witnesses would note that she left both the restaurant and the parking lot alone.
Chapter 3. Abandoned.
The next day on March 20th, a police officer would be dispatched to look at an abandoned house around a mile away from the restaurant Brianna had worked at the night prior. Arriving at the scene, it was found that a car had backed into the side of the abandoned house, causing a hold to form. Viewing the car itself, the officer would find two of Brianna's paychecks, one of which was placed on the front seat while the other was outside. Despite these details, police officers would fail to note that the car belonged to Brianna. Instead, they believed that the car had been abandoned by a drunk driver, with it subsequently being towed. Unbeknownst to her friends and family alike, Brianna never made it to her second job that day. In the following days, police would fail to verify the ownership of the vehicle. That is, until 5 days later on March 25th, when they would finally find that the car was registered to Kelly. Contacting Kelly, they would come to find that Kelly had reported Brianna as missing 2 days prior on March 23rd. In other words, over 120 hours had now passed from the last time Brianna had been seen.
Chapter 4. Witnesses.
When news of Brianna's disappearance began to be circulated through various newspapers, a handful of individuals would come forward with various statements. Of these accounts, two separate individuals would recall seeing a vehicle at the abandoned house at around midnight on March 20th. This suggests that the latest Brianna's car could have been seen at the house was only around 30 minutes after she was seen departing the restaurant parking lot. A few hours later, before the officer would be dispatched to the scene, some passing motorists would see the car and take a few pictures of the vehicle and its surroundings. Unfortunately, however, not much information could be gathered from the few photos that were taken.
Chapter 5. Anonymous tips.
Around a month after Brianna's disappearance, an anonymous tip would come in. It stated that Brianna was being held in a house around 10 miles away from where she was last seen. With police being sent out to the house, they would come into contact with two dealers. Searching the house, numerous substances would be found, but no sign of Brianna herself. Interestingly, further investigation would reveal that Brianna was acquainted with the two dealers. A few months later, another tip would also implicate the two dealers, though whether or not they had anything to do with her disappearance continues to remain unknown. Over the following years, law enforcement has claimed to have made numerous advancements in this case, all of which have seemingly borne no fruit.
Closing statements.
If you made it to the end of this video, I truly want to thank you. And if you want to see more content from me, please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing this video. I'm also more than open to any suggestions you may have. But with that being said, until next time, be sure to take care of yourself and stay safe out there.